I was 19 years old, the morning the Vareth Conclave declared my mother dead. I want to be precise about that. She was not dead. She was alive for some portion of the hours following the declaration. We confirmed that later. From Conclave infirmary records, we were never supposed to obtain. She lived through the initial detention, through the processing, through whatever the Conclave's inner chamber calls the procedure that comes after a unanimous vote to nullify. She may have been alive when the declaration went into the registry. The Conclave's legal chamber was very careful, across many subsequent proceedings, never to specify it. I was running a courier errand when it happened. That detail has been noted in every account of the Selden nullification, the junior attaché who survived because she was 40 minutes outside the building. I have heard it described as luck. I have heard it described as providence. The Conclave's own legal filings, for a period of 3 years, described it as a clerical oversight. The oversight being that my name had been included on the declaration's secondary list, and then removed before ratification, because I was not present to be declared. You cannot declare a person dead who is not in the room. That is an old procedural rule in the Conclave's own charter. I believe whoever wrote it thought they were protecting people. They were protecting me. My mother led the Earth mission at the Vareth Conclave for 9 years before the declaration. Her name was Lyra Selden, senior envoy, 1st grade, holding the principal seat on the floor at Session Level 1, which is the highest access classification the Conclave grants to a non-member delegation. She had built that standing over the better part of a decade through something the Conclave's member sovereigns had no precise vocabulary for. She showed up. Session after session, vote after vote. She learned the procedural calendar, the archival filing rhythm, the particular etiquette of the Grand Chamber's 3 presiding orders. She was not liked. She was, eventually, indispensable in the way that a load-bearing piece of furniture becomes indispensable. You stop seeing it until the day you try to move it. Deputy Envoy Aaron Corr was in the chamber when the vote passed. He did not survive the processing. The Conclave's records describe his cause of death as physiological incompatibility with standard detention protocol. He was the first. There were 7 more names on the primary list. My mother's was among them. The declaration of nullification did several things at once. It declared all 7 remaining Earth mission delegates legally deceased in absentia. It expunged every Earth mission filing from the Conclave's active registry, 11 years of accreditation documents, session records, filed instruments, diplomatic correspondence. It revoked the mission's floor access, credential standing, and observer status. It issued a formal notification to the Galactic Register of Diplomatic Missions that the Earth mission at the Vareth Conclave had ceased to exist. Then it issued a secondary notification to the Register that the Earth mission had never existed. I read that secondary notification for the first time, 11 years later, when I was preparing to go back. I sat with it for a long time. The Conclave had not simply ended us. It had reached backward and unmade us. Every filing, every session, every year of my mother's work, reclassified as erroneous administrative entries, stricken from active record, flagged as data artifacts of a non-existent party. They had declared us ungone, not dead, not expelled, simply never there. I want to be clear about what I brought back with me when I returned to the Vareth Conclave 11 years later. I brought one document. It was a single-page instrument of accreditation, signed at the founding session of the Vareth Conclave by the first presiding arbiter, a figure named Dovin Sereth, who had been dead for 60 years. The instrument established the Earth mission's floor credentials at the Conclave and specified, in language that had seemed like a formality at the time, because Conclave founding instruments are full of such language, that the mission's principal seat was held in perpetuity by the serving senior envoy, transferable within the mission by continuous succession of service, with no interruption in standing upon the death or departure of any individual holder. The Conclave expunged that document from its active registry. It did not expunge it from my mother's personal files, which she had transmitted to a registered correspondence address outside Conclave jurisdiction 48 hours before the declaration, a routine data backup of the kind the mission performed monthly. I had been maintaining that address since I was 21 years old. I had been waiting for the right moment to use what was in it since I was 24. I walked into the Grand Chamber on the 3rd day of the Conclave's autumn Grand Session, 11 years and 4 months after the declaration. I was carrying one folder. I was wearing my mother's credentials, her physical accreditation token, which had been in her personal effects, which had been shipped to me 2 years after the declaration, because the Conclave's administrative division had no category for the personal effects of a person it had declared never to have existed, and shipping them was less complicated than holding them. The floor attendant on the Session Level 1 access gate did not scan the token. No one had presented a token at that gate in 11 years. I walked to the principal seat of the Earth mission. It was empty. It had been empty since the declaration. The Conclave had not reassigned it, reissued it, or filled it, because doing so would require acknowledging it had ever been the Earth mission's, and the declaration had established that the Earth mission had never existed. You cannot reassign a seat that was never held. You can only leave it empty and hope no one sits in it. I sat in it. I placed the document on the table in front of me. The founding instrument, page 1, line 11, signed by Dovin Serath. The session continued for approximately 90 seconds before the floor recording system registered an unscheduled occupant at a primary seat and flagged the anomaly to the presiding arbiter. The arbiter was a figure named Sorath Veln. He had been in his position for 6 years. He looked at me the way a man looks at something that the architecture of his understanding has no room for, not with anger, not with recognition, but with a particular species of careful blankness that I have since come to identify as institutional vertigo. He asked, with full procedural formality, by what authority I was occupying the seat. I looked at the document on the table. I looked at him. "I've been here the whole time," I said. What followed was not chaos. The Vareth Conclave does not do chaos. What followed was a very long silence, and then the presiding arbiter requested a procedural recess, and then 4 of his legal clerks were seen moving quickly through the corridor outside the Grand Chamber's eastern gallery, and then the recess extended from 20 minutes to 6 hours, and then the session was adjourned entirely. The problem, which I will explain plainly, because the Conclave spent 4 weeks trying not to explain it plainly, was this. The Declaration of Nullification had removed the Earth mission from the Conclave's registry. A body not on the registry is outside the Conclave's procedural jurisdiction. The mechanism by which the Conclave removes an occupant from the floor, the expulsion protocol, operates only on parties that are registered. You cannot expel a party that does not exist in your records. You cannot charge a dead person. You cannot void credentials belonging to a party that has no credentials, because that party is not in your system. You cannot re-examine a founding instrument you have declared was never filed, because examining it requires acknowledging it exists, and acknowledging it exists means acknowledging the filing it was part of existed, which means acknowledging the mission existed, which means the declaration was in error, which means 7 names on a primary list require explanation of a different kind. I sat in my mother's seat for 3 days, while the Conclave's legal chamber worked through this. I did not speak again. I brought my own water. I had known the session schedule for months. On the 4th day, a junior clerk delivered a written communication to the seat on my behalf. It was not addressed to me by name. It was addressed to the occupant of Earth mission seat, principal level. The communication informed the occupant that the Conclave's legal chamber had determined that the procedural status of the Earth mission's floor credentials required further review, and that the review would be conducted under a sealed administrative process with an estimated completion window of 90 days. The 90 days passed, then another 90. The review has not been completed. The seat is still mine. The declaration is still in the Conclave's registry. So is the founding instrument, which the session archivist entered into the permanent record on day 3, because an instrument physically present on the chamber floor during an active session is subject to automatic archival entry under the Conclave's own evidentiary rules. My mother's name is still on the declaration's primary list. Her name is also still on the founding instrument. Both of those things are true at the same time. I have been in the chamber for 11 sessions since I returned. I have said nothing further. I do not intend to. My mother understood something I was too young to understand when she was alive. Institutions do not fear what fights them. They fear what they cannot process. What sits in the seat, they said, was empty. What exists in the record, they said, they erased. She taught me that by showing up for 9 years until she was indispensable. She taught me the rest by being erased. I show up.